You're watching the Chicago Cubs Fan Show on Fan Media Network. I'm Patrick Quinn.
And I'm Kamen Enchev. Patrick, we've got a big show today. The Cubs finally winning a baseball game. They lost 11 straight. Absolutely shocking. Just a week ago or a week and a half ago, it was Cubs-Brewers neck and neck. Brewers go on a big winning streak. The Cubs go on a big losing streak. We'll be talking about that losing streak. Also, the team might be sellers all of a sudden. We'll be talking about who might get traded come a few weeks from now.
All right. So let's start it off with what the heck happened with the Chicago Cubs and how did they lose 11 games, Kamen? I am not sure. I can tell you one thing. When you don't score runs off base hits and you're only hitting home runs, score runs, that's going to be a major factor. Also, add in the point about pitching, too. Finally, and I hate to say it like this, but Cubs bullpen imploded.
Yeah. This 11-game losing streak, they found every way to lose. They lost close games. The biggest issue was the hitting, but they also lost high-scoring games. They had leads. They blew the leads. They got blown out. They lost close games. Literally, what could go wrong did go wrong during this winning streak. Oddly enough, last night they finally won. Well, they won because they hit some singles, something I've been talking about on this show.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Kamen.
Exactly.
They won because they hit the ball.
Yeah.
Guy gets to first base, moves to second. Guy hits baseball, gets a double, scores a run.
It shouldn't be that hard, right? It shouldn't be that hard. Yeah.
Especially if you're getting paid as much as Chicago Cubs are paying some of these guys.
No kidding. And I'll tell you this, for the Cubs, that's just been the story all season. And really, quite frankly, the last few seasons, their offense has just always been inconsistent, and they finally hit that really rough stretch. They hit well under 200. And for me, the problem with this team is, and I know I don't want to sound like a broken record for those who listen to the show pretty often, but it is the fact that they can't hit for average. You look at this team, they're third to last in batting average in baseball, sixth in home runs, fourth in strikeouts. They're 17th out of 30 in runs scored. They're 15th out of 30 in ERA. Terrible starting pitching. Great bullpen pitching. That didn't show during this losing streak, though. And that's what it speaks to. It's a team that's one game under 500. It's because they're an inconsistent team. They have a lot of flaws, and they're going to go on a hot streak as they did a few weeks back when they were at Wrigley. But when they hit the road and they play those good teams, those flaws show more. I think 9 out of the 11 losses there were on the road, and a lot of them coming against the Dodgers and the Brewers, some of the better ball clubs.
Well, and I hate to bring this up, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Sure.
But the things that happened in the last 11 games, those are things that get you fired or traded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? David Ross could find himself fired at the end of this season very easily. And I didn't think that I would be coming to the table saying David Ross fired, but that could happen. Once you lose the clubhouse, you lose everybody, right? And then the other factor is, trading off these guys. You're looking at Bryant, you're looking at, Kimbrel could be probably the one that's most likely going to go first.
He's been the one that's been good the whole season for the Cubs. It seems like the hitters are inconsistent, the pitchers, a lot of them are inconsistent, but Kimbrel has been the star. He is the all-star. Yeah, him and Bryant are the two all-stars.
And it's well-deserved, but when you're not using your closing pitcher, there are other teams that are knocking on the door saying, hey, we need a guy, and here's a prospect. The Cubs, they don't have a whole lot of pitching prospects, and that's probably what they'll end up demanding, is some kind of pitching in my mind. At least that's what I would be wanting from a Craig Kimbrel aspect.
And I'm finally coming around on this let's trade guys thing, because I've kind of been, it's sort of nostalgic. All these guys that did so much for the World Series team, you're always just waiting for them to sort of improve, get back on track, but it hasn't happened. And at this point, there has to be something that changes. I think some of that hitting is talent-wise, but to lose 11 straight, some of that is mental. And there is something just not quite right with the club right now. And kind of I hate to say rebuild and completely start over, but in a way, that's kind of what you got to do.
Well, yeah, because when I see guys like Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo striking out consistently over that 11-game stretch, that's when I started thinking, if I'm in charge, that's what I would be doing. So the sporting news today, as it is the 8th of July, they put out an article today, so I'll give them all credit on this one. But what they were saying is, these are some interesting places. We got 5 more minutes left in the broadcast.
Sure.
But before we go, I wanted to mention a couple things. Chris Bryant, it looks like the Mets are going to be a top contender for Chris Bryant. They really need a third baseman. And who knows, if he finds another home, maybe he'll start hitting the ball for them. Javi Baez, 2 places that he could end up, White Sox or Yankees. It looks like Gleyber Torres and Baez could actually be teaming up. Who would have thunk it? But here we go.
Crazy.
Crazy.
You ready for my hot take? It revolves around some of these guys that you just talked about.
Sure. Give me your hot take. I'm ready because you're not usually the hot take guy.
No, I'm not a hot take guy. I don't throw stuff out there unless I believe it. And so here's the thing. The guy that I think the Cubs should trade first, because I think it's symbolic of their issues and it needs to set the groundwork. And this is one that's not going to make a lot of Cubs fans happy. But the guy that I think needs to go the most is Javier Baez, because he is symbolic of what this team does. He leads baseball in strikeouts. No hitter in baseball has more strikeouts. He has a lot of home runs, also doesn't hit for average. And that's the problem with this Cubs team. They aren't held accountable for what they're doing. There has to be something with their approach. And you look at a star player, he's going to go up there, strike out 2 to 3 times a night. I mean, there's a game a couple weeks ago, last week against the Brewers. They had like bases loaded, 1 out, down 1 run. You know, Baez is going for a grand slam. I mean, it's the approach. And I think that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the lineup, because that's the problem. These guys don't hit for average. These guys strike out a lot. I'm not saying Baez needs to completely be a contact hitter. You don't want to completely change who he is as a player. However, he has to be held accountable. And if you're a Cubs player and you see a guy swinging for the fences and he's all of a sudden still the popular guy in town, the hitting coach isn't going up to him, hey, Javi, you need to lay off some of these pitches. Hey, Javi, 2-strike approach. These are basics in baseball. And I think, to me, if you get rid of a guy like that, shows you sort of what they need to do, sort of like a Moneyball approach. I know, get on base, hit for average. And I also think he's probably, maybe with the exception of Chris Bryant, and maybe even more than Bryant, the most valuable guy. I think you can maybe get the most if you do trade him. So I say Baez, to me, is the first one that should go. I know Kimbrel and Bryant are more likely, but I think Rizzo's the one I'd like to hang on to, because he does actually choke up with 2 strikes.
Yes, he
does.
Maybe
not lately, but for me, Baez is the guy who I want to see go. I don't want to see him go, but someone's going to go, and he's the one that I think should go.
Well, I take your opinion, and in the minute and a half that we have left here in this broadcast, I don't know. That is a hot take, little hot take-ish. If you would have said that to me 2 weeks ago, I probably would have been shocked and dismayed and would have argued to the bone with you.
Sure.
But you're right. It does send a message, and this team does need a message. And I just hope that we're not in rebuilding mode. I'd hate to have Anthony Rizzo end his career on a rebuild. I don't know, man.
And I don't know how long the rebuild would be. They still have some pieces. I mean, the sky hasn't fallen. It seems like it has, but there's still 1 game under 500. We're not talking about one of the worst teams in baseball. I mean, they're sure to rattle off a hot streak here and there. I know they play the Cardinals this weekend. That's the one team they've had so much success with. So they might actually win that series this weekend. Hopefully.
Well, with me living in St. Louis, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio, and the sports talk people here in town say if the Cardinals do not sweep the Cubs, that series is a failure going into the All-Star break. I don't see it that way.
Sweeping a rival. Hey, Cubs are still a half game ahead of the Cardinals, by the way. If you want some silver lining, I know they're 8.5 back of the Brewers, but they're actually still a half game ahead of the Cardinals. How about that?
I'll take it. I will take it. So this will be interesting. We'll watch the Cardinals series, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the things that could be happening as we hit the All-Star break.
Yeah, and
I'm sure we'll hit more trade talks.
Yeah, the All-Star break is kind of a good time to take a break and reassess everything. So I think it's sort of coming at the right time.
All right, so we'll be back with more analysis, Chicago Cubs fans, on the Chicago Cubs Fan Show on Fan Media Network.
To host a fan show or appear as a fan on a fan show, create a profile in Fan Media Network. Then look for the news page in our website and fan show resources page. Help yourself. We give show hosts a show graphic and team colors, a simple short show format, tips on pre- and post-production, ideas to get fans and guests on your show, Apple News distribution and show sponsorship sales and services to help featured show hosts earn money. Show hosts use our iPhone app to publish their shows. Our website supports Android users.